It's the beginning of April, and I thought it was a nice time to give you a quick tour of the Polytunnel and just step you through all the different crops that I've got and then compare those crops with the ones that I've got growing outside in low tunnels, just to give you a kind of bit of a comparison in terms of what grows best in the Polytunnel and what grows best outside. And now, to be honest, what you'll see is that pretty much everything grows just fine outside in the low tunnels. But I will explain some of the challenges that we've had over winter, where the story's a little bit different in terms of what grows best where. And definitely the Polytunnel kind of wins out in a few crops. And yeah, we'll see that. So if you're interested in more information on growing in polytunnels, greenhouses, low tunnels and things like that, I've got quite a few chapters of my book that cover that topic. And that's all freely available online, and I'll put a link to that in the description. And there's loads more videos and sample planting plans from different years. So let's take a look at what I decided to do this year. So there's a few things that you notice as soon as we look in the tunnel. One is that I'm growing at multiple levels. The second is there's a lot of space here that seems to be wasted. Well, this is where I have the deck chairs and the high chair for my granddaughter and things like that. So this actually is fully kind of utilised, this space. And I will bring more containers in here as well to fill up this space here. At the moment I've only got a few potatoes and bits and pieces, but over time, during April, I'll have more courgettes and I'll have more climbing beans and all those sorts of things. So it does get utilised, but I do like the space that I get from having this nice big corridor down the centre. So I start up here with the strawberries, and hopefully you can see as I walk down here there's loads and loads of flowers on these, and that is in stark contrast to the ones outside, which are the same variety. I think they're all Sweetheart in here at the moment. Which are all an early variety. So my plan for the strawberries is that I will leave these here in the polytunnel for the first early crop. I'll take these out and move them, just leave them outside for the second early crop. And then the ones outside, which I overlaid a few seconds ago for you to compare and contrast, I'll put a low tunnel over those, so they'll be my early main crop. And then I'll have obviously a main crop and a late crop as well, because we really like strawberries. So that's the strawberries. So the next thing that we've tried this year is growing broad beans in here. Just one little container full. You can see the broad beans there. I'm actually quite interested to know whether there are actually any broad beans, so I'm going to snip this off and I'll break it open and we'll see whether I've actually got anything growing in there, because there was some debate about how self-fertile broad beans are. So that answers that question, because these were flowering when there were no pollinators around, and there are little broad beans growing beautifully in there. So I think I can safely conclude that broad beans are self-fertile, and there's a pretty good crop on here actually, so I'm very pleased about that, and I'll probably almost certainly grow broad beans in here again. Now the ones outside are about 3 weeks behind, so that gives us an extra 3 weeks of harvest, and since we don't buy beans and we don't really like frozen broad beans that much, this is a real nice bonus to have them a few weeks early. So in the corners of the tunnel, both ends, I've got carrots, and I did have a lot more carrots than this, but they're all outside now on top of my water tanks. And so I've just left 2 in here for the very earliest crop and just let the others mature outside so they're not taking up space. I actually find that carrots are very happy outside in April, so they're just slightly earlier when they're grown in the tunnel. And this is one of my tubs for courgettes, but I just popped this Kale Asian kale in here. just because it's such a fast grower. I thought I would get a nice early crop, and yeah, it's ready for harvest now, and the courgettes will be ready to plant in there in 2 weeks' time. So that worked really nicely. I only planted those in there about 3 weeks ago. And then you can see I've got a lot of lettuce, and lettuce is definitely worth talking about because it can be a bit of a challenge for me to get lettuce all the way through winter. It doesn't grow very fast in December, late December and January and early February. So getting enough of it at that period of time can be quite a challenge. And the Polytunnel is definitely the place to grow it if you want that midwinter supply. And actually I've grown a few varieties in here that I've been really pleased with. This one in particular, this Riccia, has been amazing. And it's one of my favourite lettuces actually all the way through the year. But it's been great in the Polytunnel, as is this one which is Roxy. And that one which is Red Grenoble, or I always call it Grenoble Red for some reason in all my other videos. And we do lose the odd lettuce. We've lost one there, for example. Don't know exactly why, but it's not too bad. Now if I compare this bed to the one outside, which has just been under a low tunnel, they look superficially similar. The difference is that most of this is lettuce that's grown all the way through winter, whereas the bed outside was planted in December. So really it only matured in sort of late February, and we started harvesting it in March. And I really like that as a growing technique for outdoor beds because they don't seem to overwinter so well as the ones in the Polytunnel. So this year, all this bed, all the way down here, this was all lettuce. Now obviously we don't get too much lettuce when it comes to spring, so I popped in these Asian greens. And I wasn't sure whether I would get a decent harvest off the Asian greens before they went to seed, but I was kind of hoping that I would get a harvest in April and then be able to take these out and replace this whole bed with tomatoes and cucumbers in May. And it looks like I'm going to get a great harvest. Now this variety here is 70-day improved, so it does go to seed in 70 days. That is kind of the point of it in a way, and right on cue it has gone to seed, so that's just to be expected. But the others haven't gone to seed yet, and we're already giving a really nice leaf harvest. So I've got to say I've been really pleased with this experiment. And if I contrast this with the ones in the low tunnels, you'll see that these are quite a bit bigger, quite a bit lusher, planted on the same day from the same batch of seeds, sown on the same day. So I would say, you know, that the Asian greens really love the polytunnel environment, and I also found they really love it in that kind of period, late August to October, where I also get an extra crop out of the polytunnel before I replant with lettuce. Parsley does amazingly well. We pick so much parsley off this little bed, basically 2 litres a week, and yeah, it's just the best, and it's just so much lusher and nicer than the outdoor stuff. And then we've got celery here. I think we planted that celery about October time, and maybe late September, and it's done really great, and we've been harvesting it all the way through spring so far, so all of March. We've been getting a good big handful of it, so I've been pleased with that, because I normally don't have celery to harvest in here until it's kind of late April really, so this has come 2 months earlier. You see my other carrots there. I've got some early peas in here, but to be honest I prefer to do my early peas in the low tunnel, even though they don't grow quite as big and fast as this. I find that they just give me a better crop I don't know why, I just don't think container grown peas are that great. But it'd be interesting to see how these do. These are a sugar snap variety. And then down here I've got chard, and again that chard went in October, I think, and it didn't give a very big harvest over winter, to be honest, because there's quite a lot of shade cast from this trestle table here. It's currently got all my leeks on it, but anyway, it did okay. You know, we got like a little tiny harvest, but as soon as we got to spring, we got a great harvest. I mean, I harvested that last week, and it's ready for harvest again. And so we're getting, I don't know, 4 litres a week or something like that of chard, which is really nice. Much better than the chard that we've got outside. And then we've got spinach in here and salad onions. And to be honest, they are not a great crop for a polytunnel. I just had that little bit of bed spare, and I thought, well, just in case we've got to harvest some spinach or salad onions on a rainy day and I don't want to be harvesting outside, I'll have a little patch in here. But it really doesn't do any better than the spinach and the salad onions that are in the low tunnels outside, and I'll show you those just by way of comparison. I mean, obviously the spinach is massive at this time of year because it's all ready to be pulled out and replaced with the spring crops. But yeah, I mean, we just can't harvest it fast enough, basically. And then I've got beetroot down the edges. Now, beetroot I find does do pretty well in the polytunnel. These were only planted about a month ago, and you can see them growing quite nicely, but they won't quite be ready by the time I take all this out and replant with the tomatoes and the cucumbers. And so I've only put them down the edges so I can still put the tomatoes in here and leave the beetroot in place, because there's enough beetroot in here to last us for probably 6 weeks or so, and so that will really be kind of all the way through May and into June. And this little bed here was lettuce planted out in February, I think, and it was interplanted with radish. All the radish pretty much has been harvested, although there's a couple at the back there. And of course this is now ready for harvest. It wasn't quite ready last week, but it's definitely ready now. So late plantings do really well and grow really fast in the tunnel. So this was a January sowing, February planting, ready for harvest in the beginning of April. And then I've got down here some early main crop onions. So these are tough ball, grown in modules, 3 to a cell. And, you know, to be honest, I don't think I would grow them in the polytunnel again. I've tried it for 2 years. They do fine and I get a nice early crop. But this year I tried growing them in one of my low tunnels and they did even better. And so I'll show you those now. And you can see that, you know, they're bigger, they're thicker. They will probably go to seed because they're so big. But I don't mind because I'm harvesting them in about 3 or 4 weeks' time. Or starting to harvest them in 3 or 4 weeks' time. So, you know, that's when we tend to start running out of our stored onions, or our stored onions start to sprout. So it is kind of worthwhile doing if you've got the space in your polytunnel, but it's not really necessary. Again, a low tunnel is fine. Same with garlic. So this is a bit of green garlic. I planted this out in January, I think, after turnips. So all this bed was turnips over winter. It's really not much bigger. You know, it's 2 weeks perhaps earlier than the green garlic that's growing outside. So you don't need very much of it. It is worthwhile to get that early harvest because we've almost run out of garlic in store now. So it's worth doing, but not very much. And I've got another little bed of green garlic there because I just had one little strip of lettuce there that failed to thrive over winter. So I took that out, popped green garlic in. So it's kind of like quite a useful little crop just to pop in and fill little gaps and things, but it's not a very strategic kind of crop. And then in there I've got early dwarf French beans, just heating up and hopefully germinating quite soon. And then here I'll have early climbing French beans. I normally do Cobra. And I think that's pretty much it. I do at this time of year use all these trestle tables for seedlings when it's too cold outside. And just right now it's been a bit cold for the onions, so I brought them in. But normally these are outside, and to be honest, it doesn't really make much difference to the things that are underneath the trestle tables because there's plenty of light at this time of year. So all the way down here on this trestle table, this is where I do all of my overwintered brassicas. And so those are things like my early calabrese, my early cabbages, my early cauliflowers and things like that. And by just growing them in pots, so basically they look a bit like these red cabbages would, and I plant those out in February in my deep coal frames or low tunnels, and they romp away. And I'll show you just a few of the calabrese and some of the cauliflowers now, and you'll see that they're growing really great. And the nice thing about that is that they're basically interplanted into the spinach beds in February. You could put them in January if the weather's kind. And so it means, and also after things like carrots. So the cauliflowers and the calabrese were after carrots. And then the other calabrese bed was interplanted with spinach. So it means I get a full crop through autumn and into winter, like the carrots, and then I get a crop of cauliflowers and calabrese in spring, and then the beds can be cleared for the summer crops. I'll just talk very quickly about what I do in here in summer, or actually in May. So in May, almost all of this gets cleared. Down the edges here, I put tomatoes and cucumbers. Down the edges here, tomatoes and cucumbers. Extra crops, things like ginger and things, go under the trestle tables. Some beetroot perhaps grows in front. And I take all the containers out of here because it's just too much work to water them. I also take all of these, once we get into sort of June, I take all these strawberries out and repopulate them with fresh runners in September time. And I like that because it dramatically reduces my workload in here. Watering in here is a real pain. So anything in containers I don't really want, and I don't want these beds too full of stuff. And if they're going to have anything in them, I want them to have things in that are deep rooted, like beetroot. So I don't have to overwater. I don't want to not water at all because I want to keep the beds, reasonably hydrated, because I'm going to get them replanted in September and October. So that's the kind of example planting plan, one of many ways in which you could use a polytunnel. So hopefully when you compare the results from these low tunnels with the polytunnel, you'll see that the vast majority of things are grown just as well. For example, these beetroot here. And the great thing is about these low tunnels is they make a fantastic location for growing peppers in the summer. That's why the beetroots are only down the back there, because the peppers will be in front of them, and the beetroot will be out of these beds in June when the peppers need the space. And these low tunnels are a tiny fraction of the space of the cost of the polytunnel, and you only need 4 of these low tunnels to make a polytunnel, and at least a quarter of the cost. So why bother with the polytunnel? Well, the massive difference is you can sit inside it, you can harvest in the dry, and you can grow much better salad crops in the middle of winter. And it's great because of the height for things like cordon tomatoes and cucumbers, which would rapidly outgrow these little low tunnels. Things like peas, they do great in here as a starter, but then of course the top has to come off later on. But that's also one of the lovely things about the low tunnels, is you can move them around. So you start them off with the peas and then you move them. In this case, this one is going over the early main crop strawberries. So I hope you like this quick video. My name's Steve, this is the Seaside Kitchen Garden Allotment channel, and I'll see you soon.